I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new Mazda BT-50, and I mean new. This BT-50 is no longer based on the Ford Ranger. Instead, when it came time for a new generation of this vehicle, Mazda chose to partner with Isuzu. So there's an Isuzu D-MAX underneath here, and Mazda aren't afraid to say that mechanically, this thing is all D-MAX. Mazda made no changes at all to the way this thing drives. Instead, they limited their changes to the styling, and I think it's worked really well. You can tell that the same dude who designed the Mazda CX-9 also did this vehicle because it really has the family face of Mazda's SUVs, including the attractive narrow headlights with the same Mazda DRL that you get on this brand's crossovers, the big grille, it very much looks like a Mazda. Of course, along the side profile, you can tell that this is an Isuzu D-MAX under the skin. And the same goes for much of the interior too, but Mazda were able to touch a few things in here as well, even though they did have to accept quite a lot of Isuzu bits and pieces. For starters, the trim and the look of the dashboard is a bit different to the D-MAX. The Mazda has its own pieces, including these soft pads down here, which give it a more luxurious vibe, and the overall shape of the vents and also the way the dashboard wraps around into the doors is lifted pretty much straight from a CX-9 SUV, and I think it does give the BT-50 a slight edge over the new D-MAX in terms of visual appeal. Of course, that's subjective, and you can let me know down below this video whether you think the D-MAX or the BT-50 is a better looking ute. However, a lot of the cabin is shared with the Isuzu. That includes the buttons on the steering wheel, the gauges and the color trip computer in between them, and also this large touchscreen. You can get a big touchscreen on the XTR and the GT models in the BT-50 range. This one is the XTR, whereas the base model runs with a smaller 7-inch screen. But I think you'll want to go for the bigger screen because not only is it clear and crisp, but it also comes with wireless Apple CarPlay and wired Android Auto, and that's certainly a connectivity bump for the dual cab segment. Wireless CarPlay I find to be really convenient. Now, it was really hot over the weekend that I was driving this car, so I was glad that I was in the XTR, which has these cloth seats. They're still really comfortable and they have electric lumbar, so you can get into a driving position with a lot of support on a long drive. But of course, unlike leather, which you get in the GT in a brown color, cloth doesn't get really hot in summer. It's a really smart upholstery choice for Australia for that reason. But you do get artificial leather up here on the dash, which looks pretty nice. Though the door tops are hard, there is a bit of cloth insert. It's a dual cab, it's meant to be durable, that isn't much of a problem. That said, Mazda expects a significant number of buyers who might have considered an SUV before will now think that this BT-50 is nice enough to buy instead of a crossover. Personally, I'm not entirely sure. You can still tell this is a commercial vehicle, but it is a lot nicer than it was before. Storage is good, 2 big cup holders here, a tray ahead of the shifter, but no wireless charging, and no pop-out cup holders unlike some other utes on the market, but at least the door bins are nice and large, and you get a dual glove box, although this one has been sticking. It seems to open once in every 3 tries. So up front, there's certainly a boost to the way the BT-50 looks and feels. But can you fit adults in the back? Let's find out now. Well, it's reasonably easy to get in, as there are running boards at the side of this ute and these grab handles here. Plus there are Isofix points fairly easy to locate within the folds of the seat just here. Now, room on offer has gotten better since the last BT-50, but it's still not hugely spacious. Headroom's okay. I'm a 6-footer, I've got another couple of inches. Legroom behind my own driving position's good too, but toe room is constricted, and as you can see, the bench is quite flat, so my legs have to sort of float. So that means that over a long drive, there won't be great support here in the second row of the BT-50. But the Mazda and the Isuzu are hardly alone in that regard. Most dual cabs have pretty uncomfortable back seats. There are air vents though, which certainly helps in a hot country like Australia, plus another USB port, bringing the total for this ute to 2, and a hook on the back of the passenger seat that can take a 4-kilo weight, and bottle holders in the doors too, plus a fold-down armrest with 2 cup holders. So it certainly could be worse, and for a short drive, there's more than enough back here to be comfortable in the BT-50. Next up, we'll take a look at the tray of this vehicle. Now, Mazda are particularly proud of the fact that they've partnered with ARB and a number of other suppliers to offer over 100 genuine accessories for the BT-50 that are covered by this vehicle's 5-year warranty that's standard across all Mazdas. Now this XTR isn't fitted with any of those accessories, but I'll put up some photos as an overlay here of the sorts of things that you're able to do with the new BT-50, which I think make it look pretty cool. One thing you can do is a sports bar here at the back, and it does look a little bit plain without it, though the tray itself is quite convenient. Unlike an Amarok, you can't get a pallet between the arches, which is a shame, but there is a lot of space on offer. And I actually used the vehicle to move houses over the weekend, and it was really good. Obviously, being a dual cab, the tray is a little bit shorter than some, but it's still easy with 4 clear tie down points in here. Though if I owned it, I'd certainly be arranging a bed liner so that you weren't scratching the bare paint on this particular example. Now, here on the back of the tray, Mazda have been able to change a couple of the design points. The tail lights are a little bit different, and we have these crease lines running into the tray to the new Mazda typeface on the badging, which to me looks pretty handsome. Now, we've already driven the D-MAX together, but we'll jump into the driver's seat of the BT-50 to see how this thing goes on road, even though we're expecting it to be more or less the same. So, what's the new BT-50 like from here behind the wheel? And how different is it to the outgoing version? Well, very different as it turns out, and that's not a surprise when you change the vehicle that you're platform sharing with. Now, the outgoing BT-50 was based on the Ford Ranger, the current Ranger, but it didn't benefit from the same kind of constant updates that Ford have bestowed the Ranger with. And instead, the Mazda option kind of languished, and you could tell from the interior, and you could tell from the fact it didn't get the driving improvements that the Ranger got. So this is the first really new feeling BT-50 in a long time. Of course, it feels a lot like the D-MAX, and that's because Mazda admit openly, while they did the styling job and they changed some of the components on the interior, they left the mechanical stuff up to the experts, which to them was Isuzu, and honestly it makes sense. The BT-50 is not a big global product for Mazda. Australia is the most important market, and we're a pretty small market, so this thing was never going to go all that global, and so designing one themselves would have been way too expensive, particularly when Mazda doesn't really make commercial vehicles of this type. You know, it's not like the components would have really been used in other Mazdas. So under the bonnet we have the D-MAX's 3-litre turbo 4-cylinder diesel, 140 kilowatts of power and 450 newton meters of torque, hooked up to a 6-speed auto like I've got here, or a 6-speed manual, and with 4-wheel drive in this particular XTR dual cab. There will be more inexpensive variants coming later, single cab 4x2s and the like, but they're a bit thin on the ground at the moment. It's the higher spec dual cab stuff that is reasonably easy to get your hands on, and Mazda say they've got better supply of the BT-50 than Isuzu does of the D-MAX. So if you're interested in the D-MAX and you can't get one, the BT-50 may be a good fit for you. Now, this does mean that you step down in power if you're currently in a BT-55 pot, which has 147 kilowatts of power. But that being said, this engine isn't that slow. It's certainly not a performer with the likes of an Amarok V6 or anything like that, but it gets the job done just fine, and this car's towing ability is also decent at 3.5 tons braked, up there with most of the vehicles in this segment. The engine isn't too unrefined. If we listen, it's definitely diesel-y, it's a little vibey, but it's not overly harsh or loud, and fuel consumption is manageable. I've done 266 kilometers of combined driving in this car, and I've got 10.3 litres per 100 Ks up on the clock, which, given the size and the weight of the thing, you know, it certainly could have been worse. Now, the ride and the handling is where the D-MAX made a huge leap over the last gen, and the BT-50 is much the same. It's not as improved as the D-MAX was, because we're coming from a Ranger platform that was pretty good in the first place to the new D-MAX platform, but still the steering is reasonably quick for a dual cab. I've certainly felt much slower racks, so you don't have to turn the car quite as much as you do some other utes in order to get the same result at the front end. And the suspension is fairly compliant over bumps in town, though the unladen ride in almost all dual cabs is fairly unrefined. But once you've got some stuff in the tub, then it does even itself out. But something like a Mark III Ranger or an Amarok is more comfortable to drive in with nothing back there in the tray. Refinement's okay. There's a bit of wind noise at highway speed, but it isn't too bad. And the brakes are fine, though I really would like to see manufacturers moving away from drum brakes in 2020. You can let me know what you think about that down below in the comments. Now, we will have a host of comparisons coming up with the BT-50 in future, so we can see where this ute really sits in the continuum of dual cabs in Australia. But on first impressions, it's a good ute to drive. It's now got a really durable base underneath it, and Mazda's changes do add up to, you know, quite a distinct look over the D-MAX. The warranty on the car is the same 5-year unlimited kilometre setup as other Mazdas, so that certainly gives you some peace of mind, even if it's not as much as Isuzu offers on the D-MAX at 6 years. And in terms of safety, that's where these vehicles really shine, because they meet the new ANCAP 5-star standard that means stuff like junction AEB and a centre airbag, and tech like lane keep assist and adaptive cruise control across the range. So that's a detailed look at the new Mazda BT-50 dual cab ute. It's a big improvement over the last one, even though not everyone will be pleased about it moving from Ranger to D-MAX underpinnings. Personally, I think it's a good move for Mazda, as there's no doubting the durability of this powertrain, and Isuzu have improved the way the D-MAX drives so much that the BT-50 now also enjoys those dynamics as well. But you can let me know down below the video whether you think Mazda should have stuck with Ford or another partner, and generally what you think about the BT-50 ute and whether you're considering one. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.